Daniel moved into the house at the end of October, just before the cold began to settle into the streets. It was a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town where the houses stood a little too far apart and the streetlights flickered at night as if they were tired of staying awake. The real estate agent had talked too much while showing him the place, filling every silence with unnecessary details. Daniel barely listened. What mattered was the price. The house was cheaper than anything else he had seen in months, and after the divorce he needed something simple. Something quiet. The house had 2 floors, pale walls, and an old wooden front door that creaked every time it opened. In the backyard, there was a dying tree that leaned slightly toward the house like it was trying to listen. Daniel didn't care about the details. He just wanted somewhere to sleep and start over. The first few nights passed without anything unusual. Daniel unpacked slowly, taking his time arranging books, clothes, and a few photographs he wasn't sure he wanted to keep. Most nights he stayed up late watching television or scrolling on his phone until sleep finally dragged him down. About a week after moving in, a package disappeared from his porch. The delivery notification said it had arrived at 9:14 p.m. When Daniel opened the door at 10:30 p.m., the box was gone. At first he assumed it had been stolen. Porch theft wasn't rare, and he blamed himself for not bringing it inside sooner. But the next morning he ordered a security camera online. A simple one with night vision and motion detection. When it arrived, he installed it above the front door facing the small porch and the walkway leading to the street. He didn't think much about it after that, until the first notification. It happened at 2:17 a.m. Daniel woke to the soft buzz of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. Half asleep, he grabbed it and saw the message from the camera app. Motion detected. He opened the video without really thinking. The black and white night footage flickered onto the screen. For a moment nothing happened. The porch looked empty, illuminated by the camera's dull infrared glow. Then someone stepped into frame. Daniel frowned. A man stood directly in front of the door. He was tall and thin, wearing dark clothes that blended into the night. His face wasn't clear because he stood just close enough to the camera that the angle hid most of his features. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, perfectly still. Daniel sat up in bed, suddenly awake. What the hell? He stared at the screen. The man didn't move for the entire 30-second clip. Then the video ended. Daniel looked toward the bedroom door, his heart beating slightly faster. Whoever it was, they were still outside. He climbed out of bed and walked down the hallway. The house creaked quietly under his weight. The living room was dark except for the faint orange glow of a streetlight leaking through the curtains. Daniel reached the front door. For a second he hesitated. Then he opened it. Cold air rushed inside. The porch was empty. Daniel stepped outside and looked left and right down the street. Nothing. No footsteps. No running figure disappearing into the dark. Just silence. He checked the walkway, the yard, even the street. No one. Confused, he went back inside and replayed the clip. The man had definitely been there. Clear as day. Standing inches from the door. Daniel told himself it was probably just someone messing around. Maybe a drunk neighbor, or someone checking houses for packages. Whoever it was must have walked away the moment Daniel started coming downstairs. Still, the video bothered him. The way the man stood there. Not knocking. Not moving. Just waiting. The next night, Daniel forgot about it completely. Until another notification arrived. 2:03 a.m. Motion detected. Daniel opened the clip immediately. The same man stood on the porch again. Same position. Same stillness. He was so close to the door that the top half of his face disappeared out of frame. His shoulders were slightly hunched forward as if he were leaning closer than a normal visitor would. Daniel felt a strange chill run down his back. He paused the video and zoomed in. The image blurred, but one thing became clearer. The man's head was tilted slightly. Like he was listening. Daniel rushed downstairs faster this time and threw the door open. Again, the porch was empty. This time Daniel walked farther. He stepped off the porch and scanned the yard. Nothing. No sound. No movement. The streetlights hummed softly above the road. Daniel went back inside feeling uneasy. Now it wasn't just strange. It was impossible. The man in the camera video had been standing directly in front of the door seconds earlier. There was nowhere he could have gone. Over the next 3 nights, the same thing happened. Every night between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m., the motion alert appeared. Every video showed the same man, standing in front of the door, not knocking, not moving, just watching. And every time Daniel opened the door, no one was there. By the 5th night, Daniel stopped opening the door immediately. Instead, he waited. He watched the live camera feed while standing inside the house. The man was there again, standing inches from the lens. Daniel's breathing slowed as he stared at the screen. Then he slowly turned his head toward the front door. If the man was. Daniel didn't move. For a moment, his brain refused to process what he had just heard. The house was silent again, but the sound had been clear. A slow, heavy step somewhere in the hallway behind him. His heart began to pound so loudly he could hear it in his ears. He looked back at his phone. The notification was still there. Motion detected. Inside camera. But he had never installed one. A cold pressure tightened in his chest as he slowly turned his head toward the hallway. The corridor leading to the bedrooms was completely dark. The light from the living room barely reached the entrance, leaving the rest swallowed by shadows. "Hello," Daniel said, his voice dry. No answer. He forced himself to stand up. Every instinct told him to run outside, to leave the house and not look back, but another part of him, the stubborn, rational part, kept insisting there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone had broken in earlier. Maybe the camera system had been hacked. Maybe. Another sound. A faint creak. This time closer. Daniel's body froze. It came from the hallway again. The old wooden floor had a very specific sound when someone stepped on it. Daniel had already learned which boards complained and which ones stayed quiet. The sound he had just heard was the third board from the hallway entrance. Someone had stepped on it. Daniel grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a heavy metal flashlight from the coffee table. His hand shook as he switched it on. The bright beam cut through the darkness. He pointed it toward the hallway. Nothing. The beam slid slowly across the walls, the floor, the closed bedroom doors. Empty. Daniel swallowed and took one step forward. The floor creaked under his weight. "Who's there?" he said again. Still nothing. He moved deeper into the hallway, raising the flashlight higher. The light revealed the narrow space inch by inch. The bathroom door was slightly open. The guest bedroom was closed. His own bedroom door stood at the end of the hallway. Everything looked normal. Daniel exhaled slowly. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe the notification had been some kind of glitch and the sound was just the house settling. Old houses made noises all the time. He lowered the flashlight slightly. Then he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The guest bedroom door handle was moving. Very slowly. Daniel stopped breathing. The handle turned just a few degrees. Then it stopped. For several seconds nothing happened. Daniel stared at it, frozen. Then the handle turned back to its original position. Click. The door didn't open. But someone had definitely touched it. Daniel rushed forward and grabbed the door, throwing it open. The flashlight beam flooded the room. Empty. The bed sat against the wall covered in unpacked boxes. The closet door was closed. The small window overlooked the backyard, where the crooked tree swayed slightly in the night wind. Daniel stepped inside and checked the closet. Empty. He checked behind the door. Nothing. His breathing became shallow. That's not possible. He walked back into the hallway. The house was silent again. Daniel slowly returned to the living room and looked at the camera app on his phone. The outside camera feed was still active. The porch was empty. But something about the image felt wrong. Daniel leaned closer. The front door in the camera feed looked slightly different. The angle was strange. Then he realized why. The camera was no longer facing the porch. It was facing the door itself. From the outside. As if someone had turned it. Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. He hadn't touched the camera. Which meant someone else had. Slowly, the camera feed shifted again. The lens tilted upward. And the man appeared. But this time he wasn't standing far back on the porch. His face filled most of the screen. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. For the first time, the camera showed his entire face clearly. And it looked exactly like Daniel. Same eyes. Same hair. Same jawline. But the smile was wrong. The mouth stretched too wide, revealing teeth that seemed slightly longer than normal. The figure leaned closer to the camera. so close that the night vision distorted his features. Then Daniel heard something behind him. Breathing. Right next to his ear. Slow. Wet. Daniel spun around, swinging the flashlight wildly. The beam cut through empty air. Nothing was there. But the breathing continued. Right beside him. Daniel stumbled backward until his back hit the wall. "Who are you?" he shouted. The breathing stopped. For a few seconds the house became completely silent again. Then the phone vibrated in his hand. Another notification. Motion detected. Bedroom. Daniel slowly lifted the phone. His bedroom didn't have a camera either. But the app now showed a live feed. Daniel stared at the screen, his entire body trembling. The image was grainy and dark. But it was clearly his bedroom. The bed. The window. The dresser. And someone sitting on the edge of the bed. The figure's back faced the camera. It was wearing Daniel's clothes. Slowly, the figure lifted its head. Then it began turning toward the camera. Daniel's heart hammered violently in his chest as the face came into view. It was him. Exactly him. Same face. Same expression. But the smile was even wider now. The thing on the screen tilted its head. Then it spoke. And Daniel heard the voice not from the phone speaker, but from the hallway behind him. "Why do you keep opening the door?" Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. The voice was perfect. His voice. Right behind him. He turned slowly. And this. Same jawline. But the smile was wrong. The mouth stretched too wide, revealing teeth that seemed slightly longer than normal. The figure leaned closer to the camera. So close that the night vision distorted his features. Then Daniel heard something behind him. Breathing. Right next to his ear. Slow. Wet. Daniel spun around, swinging the flashlight wildly. The beam cut through empty air. Nothing was there. But the breathing continued. Right beside him. Daniel stumbled backward until his back hit the wall. "Who are you?" he shouted. The breathing stopped. For a few seconds the house became completely silent again. Then the phone vibrated in his hand. Another notification. Motion detected. Bedroom. Daniel slowly lifted the phone. His bedroom didn't have a camera either. But the app now showed a live feed. Daniel stared at the screen, his entire body trembling. The image was grainy and dark. But it was clearly his bedroom. The bed. The window. The dresser. And someone sitting on the edge of the bed. The figure's back faced the camera. It was wearing Daniel's clothes. Slowly, the figure lifted its head. Then it began turning toward the camera. Daniel's heart hammered violently in his chest as the face came into view. It was him. Exactly him. Same face. Same expression. But the smile was even wider now. The thing on the screen tilted its head. Then it spoke. And Daniel heard the voice not from the phone speaker, but from the hallway behind him. "Why do you keep opening the door?" Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. The voice was perfect. His voice. Right behind him. He turned slowly. And this. Daniel's hand froze on the doorknob. The cold metal felt heavier than it should have, like the door itself didn't want to open anymore. On the phone screen, the porch camera still showed the figure standing outside. His face. His body. His smile. Completely identical. Daniel slowly turned his head back toward the hallway. The thing that had walked into the house was still there, standing under the dim living room light, watching him, waiting. For a few seconds neither of them moved. Daniel's breathing became shallow and uneven. His brain struggled to understand what he was seeing. One of them stood inside the house, only a few feet away. Another stood outside on the porch. Both looked exactly like him. The one in the hallway suddenly twitched. Just a small movement in the neck, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled too hard. Then it took another step forward. The floor creaked again. Daniel's instinct screamed to him to run, but the only exit was the door, and something was already waiting there. "You're not real," Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. "This isn't real." The thing in the hallway blinked slowly. When it opened its eyes again, the smile widened further. "You said that yesterday too," it said. Daniel's stomach twisted. "Yesterday," he repeated. The creature tilted its head again, studying him with eerie patience. "You always forget." Daniel shook his head violently. I just moved here. I've only been here 2 weeks. The thing laughed softly, but the sound was wrong. It echoed slightly, as if 2 voices were speaking at the same time. 2 weeks for you, it said. Much longer for me. Daniel felt something cold creep up his spine. The porch camera feed suddenly flickered on the phone screen. The outside figure moved for the first time. It slowly raised its hand. Then it knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Daniel jumped back. His heart felt like it might explode. Another knock. 3 more. The creature inside the hallway smiled wider. Go ahead, it whispered. You always do. Daniel backed away from the door. No. The porch figure knocked again. Harder this time. Thump. 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 Daniel covered his ears. Stop. But the knocking continued. Each set of knocks grew louder, heavier, as if the thing outside was becoming impatient. Behind Daniel, the hallway creature took another step closer. You see, it said calmly. You can't ignore it forever. Daniel's eyes darted between the door and the creature. What do you want from me? The creature's smile slowly faded. For the first time, its expression became serious. I want to exist. Daniel stared at it. You already do. The creature shook its head slowly. No. I exist in the reflection. In the recording. In the space between seeing and believing. It pointed a long finger toward Daniel. But you exist in the real world. Another loud knock slammed against the door. The wood shuddered. Daniel flinched. The creature continued speaking softly. Every night you watched the camera. Every night you saw me. And every night you opened the door. Daniel's mind raced. I never saw you in real life. The creature's eyes darkened. That's the rule. Another knock. Harder. Crack. A small fracture appeared in the wood of the door. Daniel stepped back again. The creature in the hallway was now only a few feet away. You invited me, it whispered. I didn't. You looked. The creature's voice lowered. You watched. Another step closer. You believed. The porch camera feed suddenly glitched again. Daniel looked down at the screen. Now there were 3 figures outside the door. All of them looked like him. All of them smiling. Standing perfectly still under the camera. Daniel's chest tightened. No, no, no. The creature inside the house turned its head slowly toward the door. They're getting impatient. Daniel's hands trembled violently. What happens if I don't open it? The creature looked back at him. Its smile returned. Then they come in anyway. The knocking suddenly stopped. The silence that followed felt even worse. Daniel held his breath. The porch camera feed flickered once more. The 3 figures were now standing directly against the door. Their faces pressed close. Smiling. Watching. And then the lights in the house went out. Total darkness swallowed everything. Daniel couldn't see the creature anymore. But he could hear it. Standing right in front of him. Its breathing was slow and calm. You shouldn't have installed the camera, it whispered in the dark. Something brushed against Daniel's shoulder. Cold fingers. Daniel gasped and stumbled backward. Suddenly the phone screen lit up again. The camera feed had switched. Now it showed the inside of the living room. From a corner near the ceiling. As if an invisible camera was watching the entire room. Daniel saw himself standing there. Frozen in the darkness. And right behind him. The creature. Smiling directly at the camera. But in real life, Daniel still couldn't see it. The thing leaned closer to the invisible camera and whispered something. The phone's speaker crackled. And Daniel heard the words clearly. Now he sees us. The front door exploded inward with a deafening crack. Wood splintered across the floor. The 3 figures from the porch stepped inside slowly. All identical. All smiling. Daniel screamed and ran toward the kitchen, his mind collapsing into pure panic. Behind him, 4 versions of himself walked into the house. Their footsteps echoed together. Slow. Patient. Hunting. Daniel slammed the kitchen door shut and locked it, even though he knew it wouldn't matter. His breathing came in desperate gasps as he looked around for anything he could use. Knife. Phone. Window. Escape. But when he turned toward the kitchen window, His reflection in the glass wasn't moving the same way he was. Daniel froze. The reflection slowly lifted its head and smiled. Then the voice of the creature echoed from the hallway. But now there were several voices, all speaking together. "Don't worry, Daniel." The kitchen door handle began to turn. "We only need one of you." The lock snapped, and the door slowly creaked open. Daniel stumbled backward as the kitchen door slowly opened. The broken lock dangled uselessly from the wood while the door creaked inward inch by inch. The hallway beyond was dark again, but he could hear them now. Several sets of footsteps moving slowly together. Not rushing, not chasing, just walking, patient, like they knew he had nowhere to go. Daniel grabbed the largest knife from the kitchen counter, his hand shaking so badly the blade rattled against the metal sink. "Stay back," he shouted, though his voice sounded weak even to himself. The door opened wider. One of them stepped inside. It was him. Same height, same clothes, same face, but the smile had become wider than before, stretching almost unnaturally across the cheeks. Behind it, the others stood in the hallway, watching, waiting their turn. Daniel raised the knife. "Don't come any closer." The thing tilted its head slightly, studying the knife with curiosity. Then it laughed. "You already tried that." Daniel felt a chill stab through his chest. "Tried what?" The creature's smile twitched. "Killing us." Daniel's grip tightened on the knife. That never happened. The creature slowly stepped into the kitchen, the others still standing behind it like shadows. "It happens every night." Daniel shook his head. "You're lying." Another step closer. "Every night you panic." Another step. "Every night you run." Another step. "And every night you try to stop us." Daniel's back touched the kitchen counter. "There's only one problem," the creature said softly. Daniel swallowed. "What?" The creature leaned closer until their faces were inches apart. "You always lose." Daniel screamed and swung the knife. The blade sliced through the air and cut across the creature's chest. For a moment Daniel felt a flash of hope. Then the creature looked down at the wound. There was no blood. Instead, the cut split open like a tear in paper. Behind the tear was nothing. Not skin. Not bone. Just darkness. The creature looked back up at him and smiled. "See?" Daniel's heart felt like it was collapsing. The other figures slowly entered the kitchen. Now there were 4 of them surrounding him. Each one identical. Each one smiling. One of them reached toward the phone lying on the counter and lifted it. The camera feed was still active. Daniel could see himself on the screen, trapped in the kitchen. 4 copies of him surrounding him like reflections that had stepped out of a mirror. The creature holding the phone tilted it toward Daniel. "Look." Daniel didn't want to, but his eyes moved anyway. The screen showed something he hadn't noticed before. Behind the group, standing in the hallway, there were more. At least 6 more copies of him. Standing perfectly still. Watching. Waiting. Daniel's legs almost gave out. "How many of you are there?" The creature shrugged. "We grow." Another one spoke from behind him. "Every time you watch the camera." Another voice from the hallway. "Every time you believe what you see." The one holding the phone stepped closer. "You gave us form." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, that's not possible." The creature smiled again. "You looked at us." It pointed to the phone. "You watched us night after night." Another voice spoke from the hallway. "And the more you watched." Another one finished the sentence. "The more real we became." Daniel felt his mind slipping. "You're not real," he whispered again. The creature leaned closer. "Then why can you hear us?" Daniel's breathing became frantic. "Why can you touch us?" Another voice whispered behind him. A cold hand suddenly grabbed Daniel's shoulder. He screamed and spun around, swinging the knife again. The blade passed straight through another one of the creatures like smoke. They laughed. All of them. The sound filled the kitchen with overlapping voices. Then the creature with the phone showed him something else on the screen. The camera feed had changed again. Now it showed the porch. But the porch wasn't empty anymore. Dozens of figures stood outside the house. All of them Daniel. Standing under the dim streetlight. Perfectly still. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. No. The creature nodded. They're waiting. For what? Daniel asked weakly. The creature pointed at him. For space. Daniel's heart dropped. Another voice from the hallway said calmly, Only one Daniel belongs here. The creature holding the phone smiled wider. And it's not decided yet. Daniel's mind raced. What do you mean? The creature stepped closer. Every night the door opens. Another voice continued. Every night one of us tries to replace you. The creature's eyes darkened. And every night, you fight back. Daniel stared at them. And tonight? The creature leaned in so close their foreheads almost touched. Tonight we finally succeed. Suddenly the lights in the kitchen flickered. The phone screen glitched violently. The camera feed shifted again. Now Daniel saw something terrifying. The footage showed the living room from earlier that night, the moment he had first heard the footsteps. But the camera angle was different. It was recording from the hallway. And in the video, Daniel was standing in the living room, watching the porch camera. Behind him stood one of the creatures. Watching him. Daniel's stomach twisted. That already happened. The creature smiled. Yes. Another camera clip appeared on the screen. Now Daniel saw himself running toward the kitchen. And behind him, several copies chasing him. Daniel realized something horrifying. These are recordings. The creature nodded. Of previous nights. Daniel's voice trembled. So this has happened before. The creature's smile slowly widened again. Many times. Daniel looked around the kitchen. At the identical faces. The identical smiles. Then a terrible thought struck him. If you've already won before, why am I still here? For the first time, the creatures stopped smiling. The one holding the phone slowly lowered it. Then it spoke quietly. Because one of us always becomes you. Daniel felt the world tilt. What? The creature leaned closer again. And one of you always becomes us. Daniel's blood ran cold. The kitchen window reflection caught his eye again. But this time, the reflection wasn't copying him anymore. It was smiling. Wider than he ever could. And slowly, very slowly, the reflection raised the knife. Daniel stared at the reflection in the kitchen window, unable to breathe. The knife in his real hand was still pointed downward. But in the glass, the reflection held it high, raised above its head, ready to strike. Daniel's fingers loosened instinctively. The knife almost slipped from his grip. That's not me, he whispered. Behind him, the creatures watched in silence. For the first time since they entered the kitchen, none of them were smiling. They were waiting. The reflection in the glass tilted its head slowly, studying Daniel with the same unsettling curiosity the others had shown. Then it spoke. But the voice didn't come from the window. It came from Daniel's own mouth. You're slow tonight. Daniel felt his jaw tremble. I didn't say that. Yes, you did, the voice replied. Daniel's throat tightened, because he could feel his lips move. But he wasn't controlling them. You always fight harder when you start realizing the truth, the voice continued calmly. Daniel stumbled backward until his back hit the refrigerator. What truth? The reflection lowered the knife slightly and leaned closer to the glass. The smile grew wider. The truth that you're not the original one. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. No. The creatures behind him shifted slightly. One of them finally spoke again. It takes longer for some of you to remember. Daniel shook his head violently. I moved here 2 weeks ago. The reflection in the window laughed softly. You moved here tonight. Daniel felt his heart pounding against his ribs. That's not true. The reflection lifted its free hand and slowly pointed at the phone still lying on the counter. Watch. The phone screen flickered again. The camera feed changed. Now it showed the front porch from several hours earlier. Daniel leaned forward despite himself. The video showed him arriving at the house that evening. He was carrying a small bag of groceries. He walked up to the porch, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Normal. Completely normal. But then the video continued. Another Daniel appeared on the street, walking slowly toward the house. Daniel's stomach dropped. This second, Daniel stopped at the edge of the porch and stared at the door. Then the video jumped forward. The first Daniel, the one with groceries, suddenly ran out of the house in terror. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. He sprinted down the street and disappeared into the darkness. The second Daniel watched him go. Then he calmly walked up the porch, unlocked the door, and entered the house. Daniel's legs almost gave out. That's fake. The creature near him shook its head slowly. That was you. Daniel looked again. The man entering the house looked exactly like him. But something was different. The smile. It was the same unnatural smile the creatures all had. The reflection in the kitchen window spoke again. That was the last one. Daniel's hands began to tremble violently. You're lying. The reflection's eyes darkened slightly. Then explain something. Daniel said nothing. The reflection continued. Why can't you remember moving your furniture in? Daniel's breath caught. Why can't you remember meeting the neighbors? Daniel's mind raced. Fragments of memory flickered through his head. Unpacking boxes. Setting up the camera. Walking through empty rooms. But they felt thin. Like dreams instead of memories. The reflection leaned closer to the glass. Because those things never happened. Daniel shook his head. No. You were created tonight. The creatures behind him slowly nodded. Just like the others. Daniel's voice cracked. Created by what? The reflection smiled wider. The camera. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the phone again. The reflection continued calmly. Every time the camera records someone looking at the door. Another creature finished the sentence. It copies them. Another voice added softly. And it waits. Daniel's chest tightened. For what? The reflection answered. For the moment they believe what they see. Daniel felt a cold wave spread through his entire body. And then, the reflection lifted the knife higher. Then the copy replaces them. The creatures behind Daniel began moving again, slowly closing the circle around him. Daniel's breathing turned frantic. No, I'm real. The reflection's smile faded slightly. So was the last one. Daniel suddenly grabbed the phone and threw it at the window. The screen shattered against the glass. The camera feed vanished. For a brief moment the entire house went silent. The creatures stopped moving. The reflection froze. Daniel gasped for breath. See? He shouted desperately. It's gone. The kitchen window reflection slowly lowered the knife. Its expression changed. Not angry. Not scared. Just disappointed. You broke the screen, it said quietly. Then it pointed toward the living room. Daniel slowly turned his head. The television had turned on by itself. The security camera feed appeared on the screen. The porch. The hallway. The kitchen. Every room in the house. Dozens of camera angles. Watching. Recording. Daniel's heart sank. The reflection finished its sentence. But the cameras are still watching. The creatures behind him began smiling again. And outside the house, through the kitchen window, Daniel could see the street now filled with people. All of them him. Standing under the streetlights. Waiting. The reflection raised the knife one last time. And whispered softly, Your turn to run. Daniel didn't think. The moment the reflection whispered those words, his body reacted before his mind could catch up. He lunged toward the kitchen door, shoving past one of the copies standing too close to the entrance. His shoulder passed through it like pushing through thick smoke, but it slowed him for just a moment. That moment was enough. Cold fingers brushed the back of his shirt. Daniel tore free and ran. His shoes slammed against the wooden floor as he burst into the hallway. The television in the living room flickered violently, showing camera angles from every corner of the house. Every screen showed the same thing, him running. And behind him, the copies began to follow. Their footsteps echoed together. Slow at first, then faster. Daniel sprinted toward the front door. The broken wood from earlier still covered the floor where the door had been forced open. Outside, the streetlights buzzed quietly. And the street was full. Dozens of figures stood under the yellow glow. All of them identical. All of them watching the house. Daniel stopped in the doorway, his chest heaving. If he ran outside, he would be surrounded. If he stayed inside, the footsteps behind him grew closer. He turned back. The hallway was now crowded. At least 8 copies slowly walked toward him. Their movements were calm, almost relaxed, like predators who already knew the hunt was over. One of them spoke. "Run." Another one smiled wider. "Run like the others." Daniel's mind raced wildly. There had to be a way out. A way to break whatever this was. His eyes darted toward the security camera mounted above the door inside the living room. The camera. Every time he had seen them, it had been through a camera first. Every time they had appeared, the cameras had been watching. Daniel suddenly remembered something the creature had said. Every time the camera records someone looking at the door, it copies them. Daniel slowly looked back at the television. All the camera feeds were still active. Recording. Watching. His reflection was still visible in several screens at once. He whispered under his breath, "That's how you exist." One of the creatures tilted its head. "What did you say?" Daniel suddenly grabbed the heavy flashlight he had dropped earlier in the living room. He lifted it high. Then he smashed it directly into the security camera above the door. Crack. The lens shattered. The television flickered violently. One of the creatures stumbled. Daniel stared. The copy that stumbled looked confused, like its body had briefly lost shape. Hope surged through Daniel's chest. "It's the cameras," he whispered. Another creature stepped forward quickly. "Stop." But Daniel had already turned. He ran toward the television and slammed the flashlight into the screen. The glass exploded outward in a shower of sparks. The camera feeds vanished instantly. Several of the creatures staggered at the same time. Their outlines flickered strangely, like a corrupted video struggling to play. One of them grabbed Daniel's arm. Its fingers felt colder now. Less solid. "You can't stop them all," it growled. Daniel yanked his arm free and ran down the hallway. The creatures followed, but their footsteps sounded less certain now. Like they were losing balance. Daniel burst into the bedroom and looked around frantically. He remembered the small camera he had installed inside earlier that week when the porch videos first started disturbing him. It was mounted in the corner above the dresser. Watching the room. Recording. Daniel climbed onto the dresser and ripped the camera off the wall. The wire snapped. The device went dark. Behind him, 2 of the creatures suddenly collapsed to the floor. Their bodies twisted unnaturally before dissolving into black smoke. Daniel stared in disbelief. "It works." But then a voice came from the hallway. Calm. Cold. "You're too late." Daniel slowly turned. The reflection creature stood in the doorway. The one from the kitchen window. The one holding the knife. Unlike the others, it looked perfectly stable. Perfectly solid. And it was still smiling. Daniel backed away. "I destroyed the cameras." The creature stepped into the room. "Yes." Daniel's voice trembled. "So you're done." The creature shook its head slowly. "You misunderstand." Daniel's stomach dropped. "You were the last recording." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "What?" The creature pointed toward the broken bedroom camera in Daniel's hand. "You destroyed the camera after it recorded you." Daniel stared at the device. His hands started shaking again. "You already exist." The creature took another step closer. The others needed cameras to stay stable. Daniel's throat tightened. "But you." The creature smiled wider. "You've already replaced someone." Daniel's heart pounded violently. "That's not true." The creature leaned closer. "Look outside." Daniel turned toward the bedroom window. The street was still full of figures. But something had changed. They were slowly walking away. One by one. Disappearing into the darkness of the street. Daniel's voice came out as a whisper. "Why are they leaving?" The creature stepped beside him and looked out the window too. "Because they no longer need to replace you." Daniel's stomach twisted. Painfully. "What do you mean?" The creature turned its head slowly and looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "Because one of us already did." Daniel felt the world tilt. "No." The creature's smile faded slightly. "Think carefully." Daniel's memories rushed through his mind again. Arriving at the house. The strange videos. Opening the door every night. But now something else surfaced. That video on the phone earlier. The man running away. The copy entering the house. Daniel's breathing stopped. What if I was the one who entered the house? The creature nodded slowly. You were. Daniel's hands began trembling uncontrollably. And the real Daniel. The creature gestured toward the dark street outside. He ran. Daniel felt a deep emptiness open inside his chest. No. The creature turned toward the door. Well. Daniel's voice shook. What happens now? The creature paused. Then it smiled one last time. Now you live his life. Daniel stood frozen in the silent bedroom. Outside, the last figure disappeared into the darkness of the street. The house became completely quiet. No footsteps. No whispers. No cameras. Just Daniel. Alone. Several minutes passed before he slowly walked back into the living room. The broken television screen reflected his face in the cracked glass. He stared at it. The reflection stared back. Same eyes. Same expression. But slowly, very slowly, the reflection's mouth began to stretch into a wider smile. Wider than Daniel was trying to make. And that's when Daniel realized something even worse. Even without the cameras, the reflection was still watching him. Daniel stood frozen in the living room, staring into the shattered television screen. The cracked glass reflected his face in broken pieces, like a puzzle that no longer fit together correctly. But the smile in the reflection kept growing. Daniel forced his own lips downward. The reflection didn't follow. It continued smiling. Slowly. Unnaturally wide. Daniel's chest tightened. No, he whispered. He stepped closer to the screen. The reflection leaned closer too, but not at the same speed. It was slightly delayed. Like a video feed with poor connection. Daniel raised his hand. In the reflection, the hand lifted a second later. But the smile never disappeared. Daniel's heart pounded harder. You're still there, he murmured. The reflection blinked. Then it spoke. But the sound didn't come from the television. It came from everywhere in the house. You destroyed the cameras. Daniel's breath caught. But you forgot something. The reflection's head tilted slowly. You are one now. Daniel stumbled back. What does that mean? The reflection's smile softened slightly. You think the cameras created us. Daniel didn't answer. But they didn't. The reflection tapped the inside of the glass with one finger. They only showed us. Daniel's voice trembled. Then what created you? The reflection leaned even closer. The cracks in the glass distorted its face, stretching the smile even further. You did. Daniel shook his head. No. Yes. The reflection's voice became calmer. You saw something that shouldn't exist. Daniel's mind raced. You believed it. A pause. And belief is enough. Daniel suddenly felt something strange. His skin felt cold. Not like normal cold. More like the air around him wasn't touching him properly. He looked down at his hands. For a moment they seemed slightly blurred. Like the edges weren't completely solid. Daniel blinked quickly. The effect vanished. His hands looked normal again. But the reflection was watching him carefully. You feel it now, it said softly. Daniel's breathing quickened. What's happening to me? The reflection smiled again. You're stabilizing. Daniel's stomach twisted. I don't want this. The reflection shrugged. Neither did the others. Daniel's mind flashed back to the video. The man running away from the house. The real Daniel. He escaped. The reflection's eyes darkened slightly. For now. Daniel stepped away from the television. I'm leaving. The reflection laughed quietly. You can try. Daniel grabbed his jacket from the chair and walked quickly toward the front door. The broken wood still hung from the hinges where the copies had forced their way inside earlier. Cold night air drifted in from outside. Daniel stepped onto the porch. The street was empty now. Silent. The streetlights flickered weakly in the distance. No copies. No figures watching the house. Just quiet darkness. Daniel exhaled slowly. Maybe it was over. Maybe the reflection had just been trying to scare him. He stepped off the porch and walked down the street. Each step felt strangely light. almost like gravity wasn't pulling on him the same way. But he ignored the feeling. He kept walking. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The neighborhood remained silent. No cars. No people. Not even dogs barking in the distance. Something about that silence felt wrong. Daniel slowed his pace. He noticed the windows of the houses he passed. Every one of them was dark. No lights. No movement. Then he saw something that made him stop. A small electronics store at the corner of the street. The front window was filled with televisions. All of them turned on. Daniel's stomach tightened. Every screen showed the same thing. The front porch of his house. Live camera footage. Daniel stepped closer to the glass. His reflection appeared in the dark window. And once again, it was smiling. Wider than he was. Behind him, every television screen flickered. The camera feed zoomed slowly toward the front door of the house. The door creaked open. A figure stepped out. Daniel felt his heart stop. It was him. Another Daniel. Standing on the porch. Looking directly into the camera. And smiling. Daniel slowly turned around. The street behind him was no longer empty. Dozens of people now stood under the streetlights. Perfectly still. Watching him. Every single one of them had the same face. His face. Daniel whispered in terror. No, this isn't over. One of the figures stepped forward from the crowd. It looked exactly like him, but its smile was calm. Confident. Like someone greeting a new coworker. It stopped a few feet away and spoke gently. Relax. Daniel's hands trembled. What are you? The figure tilted its head slightly. We are what's left. Daniel looked at the others standing in the street. How many of you are there? The figure glanced around casually. Thousands. Daniel felt his knees weaken. That's impossible. The figure shrugged. Every camera. A pause. Every screen. Another step closer. Every reflection. Daniel's voice came out barely audible. You're everywhere. The figure nodded. And now? It looked directly into Daniel's eyes. So are you. Daniel tried to step backward. But something strange happened. His feet didn't move. It felt like the ground was holding him in place. The figure lifted a small phone and turned the screen toward Daniel. A camera app was open. Recording. Daniel saw himself standing there on the screen. Perfectly clear. Perfectly centered. The figure smiled wider. Your first recording. Daniel felt a deep dread spread through his chest. What happens now? The figure pressed a single button on the phone. The recording icon turned red. Now, it said calmly, someone else sees you. Daniel looked up. Across the street, a man stood outside his house holding his phone. Watching. Confused. Curious. The man zoomed in on Daniel's face. And in that moment, Daniel felt something inside him shift. Like his body was being copied again. Duplicated. The smiling figure beside him whispered softly, Welcome to the camera. And somewhere far away, a new doorbell camera detected motion.